All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming back. We will get started. So I've got about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to try to stick to my slides this time a little better, not tell so many stories. And that heart attack, we're talking heart attacks today, because that's the number one killer, and has been for a little while, but used to not be that way. Before we get into that though, because I've got an hour and 20 minute time slot, I just want to wrap up a couple things from yesterday I didn't quite get to, but they're important and they're pertinent to the heart attack discussion we're going to have. So, first thing, the genes. There's something besides genes in play. Genes, I describe them to my patients as just books on a bookshelf, full of information. But the books are closed and they're on the bookshelf. Somebody or something has to tell the librarian to go over to the, third bookshelf, second shelf, third book from the right, pick that one up and go to chapter 22, page 58, read paragraph 1. Give me that information and I'll take that and do something. So the things that are directing your body to turn certain genes on, turn them off. This is called genetic expression. So just because you have a gene, ladies in the room, the BRCA gene you may have heard about for breast cancer, or there's genes associated with Alzheimer's and heart attacks and stroke. So you can have the gene. Well, just keep that gene turned off. Keep that book closed and on the shelf. So, this gene thing, we really need to focus more on what's called epigenetics. Epi means above the gene, outside the gene. And this is a very big topic. I have a long lecture just on epigenetics. We're not going to do the whole lecture. But I just want to clue y'all into that this whole theory that genes drive everything is not true. And it's well documented in the literature. In fact, there's an oncologist at Johns Hopkins, and he wrote a book about 15 years ago all about the gene theory of cancer. And he was out there, he's on the Today Show and all the news shows, just promoting this thing about genes, mutated genes cause cancer. That's 15 years ago. And he's written 2 books since then. In his latest book, it's all about this. Now, it's epigenetics. It's above the genes. It's not the genes. Something's turning these genes on and off. One of those things that I didn't get to tell you about yesterday too much, the microbiome. So the Human Genome Project, around the year 2000 or so, 1999, 2000, we didn't know how many genes a human being had. We knew fruit flies had about 23,000, so we figured humans, because we're so much more highly evolved, they thought, we're going to have at least 100,000, 200,000 genes. And they did the Human Genome Project, counted all our genes, and it was about 25,000. And everybody's scratching their head thinking, well, how in the world are we such a highly functional species with only 25,000 genes? Well, kind of a side thing they found during that study, because they were having to pull material, blood and saliva or cheek swabs, whatever, to get from the humans to get the samples. Was they were analyzing that, they had to discard 90% of the DNA that they found because it wasn't human. And it turns out, I think I mentioned yesterday, we're 9/10 not human. They were counting, and every 10th genetic material was human, the rest of it was non-human, and it was these guys. The microbes. The microbiome, that word means all the microbes that live in you, on you, around you. You actually have a cloud of microbes. It's unique to you and follows you around. You got microbes in your nose, your sinuses, your ears, your mouth, all the way down the mouth. Of course, the gut, the GI tract. Every orifice of your body has a microbiome to it. It's amazing. And when you're a baby in the womb, you don't have a microbiome. Your gut is sterile. You come through the vaginal birth canal, that's where you pick it up. Your mama's microbiome is what seeds your microbiome. And breast milk, you get some more of it. And that's a beautiful thing. Very beautiful thing. But we didn't even know any of this. Like I said, there's a Human Genome Project around 2000. The very first time the word microbiome was found in the medical literature, this is the year I graduated from medical school, 2002. First time the scientists even published on this thing. And of course, we see that by 2015, we're at over 2,000 articles. and now we're way surpassed that. So my point is, it's a pretty new topic as far as medical doctors know. I'm just going to show you a couple quick things here. These are 4 different bacteria that should live in the gut of every human. And what they found is kids that don't have enough of these 4 tend to get asthma. We don't know exactly why that is, but something about these bacteria in your gut communicate with, talk to, and now we know even through Wi-Fi, EMF signaling basically, to your immune system. 80% of your immune system resides just on the other side of your GI tract. It's called the GALT, G-A-L-T, gut-associated lymphatic tissue. You know your lymph nodes here, when you get a sore throat, they swell up. So you have lymph nodes everywhere, but 80% of this lymph material, which is your immune system's in the gut. So these bacteria talk to that immune system, keep it balanced the right way. This is a guy out of Australia. These peanut allergies you hear about in these kids, this particular strain of bacteria, they added it back into the gut of these kids, and 80% of them resolved their peanut allergy. So something about this guy talks to our immune system and gets it lined out the right way where it's not going to overreact to peanut allergies. This one, so it's all about balance. This one gets out of balance, and too much of this one is associated with a hyperstimulated immune system to the point it leads to, or associated with MS. An interesting side note in this study, they looked at the microbiome of people that live in India, where there's very little multiple sclerosis, and it had a unique kind of composition. And then they followed these, when someone immigrated from India to the United States, and they tracked them over the years, and their microbiome shifted to U.S. Microbiome, and their rates of MS rose consistent with the United States rates. Here's one for kidney stones, this one right here. If you don't have enough of these guys, you will tend to make more kidney stones. This one is associated with skin cancer if you don't have enough. And here's a quote, and this is from Daniel Chen. He's a head of the cancer immunotherapy research at Roche Genentech. He said, 5 years ago, if you had asked me about bacteria in your gut playing an important role in your systemic immune response, I probably would have laughed it off. Most of us immunologists now believe that there really is an important interaction here, and that was way back 2015. So the amount of information and knowledge we're gaining about these microbes in the gut is pretty incredible. There's ones that are associated with eczema, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, appetite, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time there. Just kind of wanted to let you know, and we're going to talk this afternoon if you come to the workshop, fermented foods like sauerkraut, but there's others. These are foods that have good bacteria from the soil that got on that cabbage leaf, and you allow those things to populate good, and you eat that. I mean, I had a lady just the other day completely resolved her acid reflux by drinking milk kefir. That's fermented milk product. But anyways, these bugs in your gut, super important. You really need to nourish your gut bugs. And standard American food, processed food-like substances, this stuff Americans eat that they think is food, but it's not. I was talking to somebody outside in the lobby yesterday. Just flip the ingredients over, and if you can't pronounce them, or if there's more than 3 or 4, it's probably not real food, even though it's on the grocery store shelf and they call it food. If your great-grandparents wouldn't recognize it, you probably don't want to eat it. All right, a little more on genes, that it's not your genes. So this paper came out, this was way back in 2008. 2008 pharmaceutical research. Only 5 to 10% of all cancer cases can be attributed to genetic defect. 90 to 95% are rooted in environment and lifestyle. 80% of heart attacks, lifestyle related, not genes. Here's, to drive this point home, the agouti mice. So the agouti mice are used to study obesity and diabetes because they have a gene mutation that causes them to be obese. Well, some guy one day had this thought, what if we fed these mama mice, the agouti mice with the gene mutation, let's feed them a bunch of B vitamins in their rat chow before they conceive. So they did. And then they conceived and had babies, and the babies came out normal, not obese, and brown fur instead of obese yellow fur. They still have that agouti mutated gene. Something about the B vitamins in the mama's rat child kept that gene turned off. It's incredible. This is Dean Ornish out at UCLA. So he took prostate cancer, guys with prostate cancer, and he did a biopsy and he got the cancer cells and he looked at them, and these certain genes are associated with prostate cancer and they were turned on. There's genes that are associated with suppressing cancer suppressor genes. They were turned off in these guys. So he took these guys, did diet changes and stress management on them, and went back in a few months and rebiopsied them, got the cells, and their cancer grow genes had turned off, and their cancer suppressor genes had turned on, and their PSAs were going down, and they didn't have cancer anymore. The Pima Indians, Southeast Arizona, pre-World War II, 0 cases of type 2 diabetes ever recorded in the whole tribe, ever, in their history. And today, 50% of the tribe has type 2 diabetes. Genes don't change that fast. That's not from genetic mutation. That is epigenetic influences, mainly dietary, mainly the seed oils. Magic Pill, you can watch it on Netflix if you want to, but it's basically about Aborigines in Australia, and it's kind of the same as the Pima Indians. They interview these Aborigines, the old guys, and they're like, yeah, we used to just die from trauma from fights and hunts and, just trauma, or just old and don't wake up. But now they're all dying from diabetes and strokes and heart attacks. And the government came in and spent millions and millions of dollars trying to fix the situation, and it didn't get fixed. And they brought in a couple guys who taught them how to eat their original ancestral diet, and lo and behold, their diabetes went away. This guy, Dr. Day, and I interviewed him on my radio show or podcast a few years ago. You can go listen to it. Dr. Day's a cardiologist, I think in Utah maybe. Anyways, he was in his late 40s and on 8 medications, pretty sick guy. Acid reflux, hypertension, depression, arthritis, all kinds of stuff. He goes to China to give a lecture, and his colleagues over there in China notice how he's just overweight, he's red, he's inflamed, he's hurting, he's, I guess, telling them about all his problems. And they said, well, you need to go out to this village in China, because over there they don't have any of these diseases. They're not sick at all, and they live to be 100, 110, 115, no nursing home. They're out in the field working still. So he went and he interviewed and he observed and he looked, what are y'all eating? What are y'all drinking? And what's your exercise like? What's your sleep routine? Just all their everything. And he drew their blood. And he analyzed that blood for all the genes that we know kind of associate with cancer, Alzheimer's, heart attack, stroke. They had all those genes, but they didn't have any of those diseases. This guy, I mentioned him yesterday, from Cleveland, Ohio in 1920, 1925, he started noticing his patients in Ohio, he's a dentist, they were starting to have hypertension, arthritis, some heart attacks were starting to creep in, some cancers, and these are all new things. And he told his wife, something going on. These people are getting sick with these things I've never seen before. And so he left, he closed his practice and he traveled the world, he and his wife, set out on a mission to go find people somewhere in the earth that weren't getting arthritis and high blood pressure and malignancies and heart attacks. And he found them. He found them everywhere. 14 different people groups all over the earth. He went north into Canada, some Native Americans, and he went over to Alaska to some indigenous people. I used to call them Eskimos. I was giving this talk in another state, and some lady came up afterwards. I didn't know. Eskimos is like a derogatory, but the point is in the book, he said no heart attack, no malignancy at all in Alaska where the indigenous folks were living. The surgeon who'd been there since 1870 told Weston Price, I never saw a single malignancy in the natives until they moved from their village into Anchorage and started eating what they call in the book modern food, which was white flour and processed sugar. But he found them all over the world. He went to the South Pacific Islands and he went to the Amazon rainforest, went over to the British Isles, the Swiss Alps, Africa, 14 different groups all over the world, and he saw the same thing. If they ate their ancestral food, no heart attacks, no malignancies, and they didn't get tuberculosis. If they ate processed white flour and sugar, usually brought into their village by a Western missionary, or if their village was close to a port where ships were they had access to white flour and sugar. It's where he saw disease start to come. This is real pertinent to our heart attack talk. Because if you remember yesterday, I said heart attacks they're new. 1912 was the first heart attack ever. And the first comment I usually get from folks is, oh, that's because in 1900, we weren't living even to be old enough to get heart attacks. False. Here's the truth about 1900. Late 1800s, early 1900s in the big cities, New York, Boston, all the big cities back east, the infant mortality rate was 50%. You had a 50-50 chance of making it to your 5th birthday. Which means if you had twin babies, odds are one's going to die before they turn 5 from an infectious disease. And the other one, if he survives past 5, he'll make a normal lifespan about 80 years. Well, you average 80 and 2 years old, you're going to get about 40. So when you go look at the stats on what was the life expectancy around there, that's why it's skewed. If you made it past your 5th birthday, you had a normal life expectancy into your late 70s to 80s. Therefore, if heart attacks were going to get you, they would have got you. What caused this dramatic, and this is the point of this slide. This is 1900 infant mortality rate to the United States. This is just for measles. I'll show you in a minute diphtheria and pertussis, whooping cough, and all the others. So we see this dramatic decline. In fact, if you did the math, it's a 98% decline in infant mortality from measles. And all infectious diseases follow the same trend. Pre-1960s, when the vaccines started coming out. So I was under the assumption when I left medical school that the vaccines saved humanity. But it's clear when you go look at the data, that's not true. And this is not going to turn into a vaccine talk. The point is the truth. The truth is there was a 99%, 98% drop in infant mortality prior to vaccination. Here's some of those others. Some of these didn't even ever have vaccines. Scarlet fever never had a vaccine. Typhoid, that vaccine was never widely used, but they dropped at the same time. So some really smart scientists have looked at this, way smarter than me, epidemiologists, researchers, PhD, mathematician type folks, Harvard Medical School dean, I'll show you him in a minute, multiple peer-reviewed published studies, because people wonder what caused that huge, why are our babies not dying anymore? So this is a publication in the journal Pediatrics. This is published in the year 2000 by Geyer. And this is he extensively studied a century of recorded data. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Johns Hopkins researchers concluded, quote, vaccination does not account for the impressive declines in mortality from infectious diseases seen in the first half of the 20th century. That's Hopkins CDC, published in Pediatrics. This is McKinley and McKinley. That's a husband-wife team. This is Boston University, 1977. They're epidemiologists. They concluded in this study the exact same thing. You could attribute medical doctors with antibiotics and vaccines. You could give them about a 2% in that decline. This is Dr. Ed Cass, president of the Infectious Disease Society of America. He founded that society. Infectious disease doctors are experts in infections. He was the founding member of that society. He was the dean of Harvard Medical School, and this was his conclusion when he looked at the data. It was the terrain. That's why I'm a terrain doctor, and I get made fun of by some folks for that. It's all about the terrain. It's never about the germ. I'm not saying germs don't play a part. What I'm saying is germs are going to seek out a dirty environment, a dirty terrain, a compromised immune system. And I'm not going to get into the rest of it. Smallpox, all of it. I can show you in every single one. It's poverty and malnourishment. It's dirty environment that sets that human being up for a bug coming in. There's a study where they looked at the microbiome, and 90% of the folks had poliovirus in their gut, never had a symptom. So there's more to it than that. It's not just there's a germ in my face, I just breathed it in, I'm automatically sick. No, you have an immune system. That's why I didn't get worried when I walked into that room with 5 measles guys, and I wasn't standing across the room at the back wall way away from them and scared, and I need to get out here in 2 seconds. And no, I have an immune system. All right, so I just want to set this talk up, heart attacks, by reviewing that real quick. Because, I mean, like I told you at the beginning of the show yesterday, or the talk yesterday, a lot of what I say is going to be opposite of what you probably thought or taught, or maybe your doctor says, or the doctors on the news will tell you. And I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm just saying the whole reason 13 years ago I changed my practice is because I learned the truth, and then I saw the truth implemented in my patients. I didn't tell you all that. When Roby Mitchell, who was the doctor in Amarillo, he's dead now, but he was going back and forth with me on the phone. I kept calling him crazy and quack, and there's no way, and who are you, and your license got pulled, and blah, blah, blah. And a year we went back and forth on the phone, and he finally said, I'm done talking to you about this. Send me your 10 sickest patients. And I had some really sick patients in Post, Texas. And they'd been to all the specialists. They'd been to the medical school, to the specialists. Nothing against them. They've been to UT Southwestern, kind of the best in Texas. They've been to all those. So bad ulcerative colitis, bad chronic prostatitis, horrible diabetic, 74-year-old guy with diabetes on maximum oral medication, refused insulin. Just some really, really sick people. And they all came back well. And that was it. That done deal for me. I went to medical school to help people. Nobody could help these 10 people, and they come back in 3 or 4 months and they're totally well. So wherever the truth leads, that's where you go. Even if it goes against what you thought you knew. Mark Twain, it ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Translation, we need to be a little more humble as physicians, and probably just as human beings in general. We just need to realize we don't have it all figured out. And there's another quote, I don't have it, and it was another former dean of the medical school at Harvard. This is years ago, this is like in the 40s, and he told the medical school class that was coming in, he gave a big speech to them, pumping them up. But in that speech he said, guys, half of what we're going to teach you is actually wrong, and the other half is right, and the problem is we don't know which half is which. And it's true. I don't think I have it in this presentation today, but they've actually done a study on this. Much of what doctors do in their day-to-day practice is actually contraindicated and wrong. But once a doctor learns something, it is very, very, very difficult for him to change his mind or go a different way, and pretty much you got to wait for them to retire and a new generation to come. But what did that new generation learn? Who taught them? And that's kind of the problem. All right, I told y'all yesterday bacon and eggs and biscuits and gravy, and I wasn't lying. That was my breakfast. Now, when I started medical school, if you would have showed me that, I would have said, no way, that'd give you a heart attack. That bacon grease will clog up your coronary arteries and give you a heart attack. I can't do that. In fact, my wife, who I told y'all grew up in a farm and ranching family, and her daddy's a big cattle rancher. And anyways, we get married. She was at WT. She moves down to Houston where I was in med school. We were in a little apartment there, and she starts cooking her way. And I still remember like yesterday, she said, babe, supper's ready. And I came out of it was a 2-bedroom apartment. We made the 2nd bedroom my study. I was in there studying. She hollered at me, it's time to eat supper. And I come out of that bedroom, and I can see across that little apartment to the little kitchen area. And she had set the bowl as a bowl of chili and cornbread. And I could see from across the room, that cornbread had a thick layer, I thought, looked like icing, because it was just this thick white, yellow. And I said, babe, what is that? She said, that's butter. And I said, you can't do that. You can't feed me like that. My grandpa had a heart attack, and butter causes heart attacks, and you're going to give me a heart attack if you feed me this. And I got on to her. And then she was buying whole milk. And I said, we cannot drink whole milk. You need to get the skim. And we almost split ways that first week of marriage. And now look at me. She loves to remind me how she was right. And so, guys out there, you better listen to those wives. All right, heart attacks. Where'd this whole thing come from that bacon grease is going to give us heart attacks? I'll show you where it come from here in a minute. And it's about 1959, 1960. A guy proposed a theory, and that theory was wrong. And that guy's name was Ansel Keys. But here's a quote from George Mann, who's a physician and a researcher, professor, and he was the associate director of the Framingham study. That may not mean anything to you, but in the medical world, doctors and nurses and medical students and researchers, the Framingham study is a very, very famous epidemiological study. Framingham, Massachusetts. They studied people that lived in that town for for decades, and they're pulling data out of it to try to make some conclusions. But anyways, so Dr. Mann was a director of this study. I mean, it's a big deal. He's a big guy. And he said a generation of citizens has grown up since the Ansel Keys diet heart hypothesis was launched as official dogma. They've been misled by the greatest scientific deception of our time, the notion that consumption of animal fat causes heart disease. No, this was pre-COVID. Yeah, that was July of '85, actually. That was a long time ago. So this truth has been out there a long time, guys. And it's still not known. But you're going to know today. And it's not just my opinion. And I could spend 3 hours pulling published peer-reviewed literature from big journals like this one, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. That's a prestigious cardiology journal. Every cardiologist I know of would listen to it. August 7th of 20, they did a review study. A review study goes back and reviews all the studies they can find on this topic, and then they summarize it and like give you the summary. I love review studies. You don't have to go, read every single piece of data. And that's their conclusion. You read right here, several foods rich in saturated fatty acids, such as whole fat dairy, dark chocolate, unprocessed meat, are not associated with cardiovascular disease. That was their conclusion in 2020 when they looked at all the data they could find. Interesting thing, in that article, you go read through it, the current evidence base, health effects of saturated fatty acid depend on the interacting effects from naturally occurring food components and from unhealthy compounds introduced by processing. When man puts his hand on something, usually, not always, but usually, it's going to result in something not beneficial for your health. So we want to get as least processed food as possible. Straight off the farm into your mouth is what the best is. But they noted that the processing is the problem. So here's another article. This is JAMA in 2022. And what they did, another review. So they went and looked at 21 randomized controlled trials that use statins. Those are drugs to reduce your cholesterol. Because they want to know how much effect does that really have. Because everybody's on statins. Statins are our savior. Statins going to prevent the heart attack. So what's the average prevention? Reductions in the absolute risk of 0.8% for all-cause mortality. Translation, we're spending $1 trillion or whatever it is on statins, and we're hanging all our hope on a statin. That is the cardiologist's #1 tool for you to try to prevent a heart attack. So the best our healthcare system can do to prevent the #1 killer is 0.8% reduction in mortality. That's not very good. And I think I'll show you later. That little bit, very, very little bit, less than 1% benefit of a cholesterol-lowering drug is not because it lowers your LDL number. It's because statins have one good side effect that I know of. They have a little bit of anti-inflammatory effect. So they decrease inflammation in the body, and we're about to see here in a minute. Inflamed cholesterol is a problem. High cholesterol is not a problem. In fact, the people with the highest cholesterol live the longest. I'll show you those studies here in a minute. You want to decrease your risk of Alzheimer's, cancer, death from infectious diseases like COVID and flu? Get your cholesterol up. It's the #1 battle I fight, the #1 misunderstanding that I fight in my office. The #1 fear that I fight in my office is fear of high cholesterol. And the literature is clear. Again, 1985 is when George Mann quoted that. This truth has been out there a long time. That just summarizes the decrease. And again, it's an anti-inflammatory effect that gives you that. Here's what a statin does. It blocks this enzyme. Remember yesterday I told you enzymes are the workers in the body. They clip stuff off. They add stuff to change things. So this statin blocks the enzyme that changes this HMG-CoA to mevalate. Well, this is the pathway that makes your DNA. This is a pathway down here that makes your CoQ10. We're just blocking all these essential nutrients, including cholesterol. Cholesterol is an essential product in the body. Your cell membranes are made of it. Your brain's full of it. Your hormones come from it. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, vitamin D. It's an absolute key component to God's design. So when you just shut it down, you can imagine what happens, and we'll talk about the side effects here in a minute. So high cholesterol does not cause heart attacks. Half the people that get a heart attack have normal cholesterol levels, quote unquote normal. That, they're at the level that the doctors say to be at, and half the people have high. So if it's half and half, then probably that means something else is going on here. And as I just showed you, lowering cholesterol by blocking that enzyme, now your cholesterol, your LDL is below 100 where the cardiologist wants it. How does that translate to decreased mortality? Less than 1%. So here's a problem. Native LDL, I call it God-given LDL. Remember, essential component of God's design, LDL, your liver's making it. 80% of that LDL that your doctor's checking in your blood is from your liver making it, not from your food anyways. And actually, if you decide to eat just an egg white omelet and eat a low cholesterol, low saturated fat diet, your body kind of freaks out a little bit. It senses that. It knows, man, this person's not eating enough cholesterol, and it tells the liver to ramp up production. You've got to maintain cholesterol production for life. You die without it. So we make LDL. So just right off the bat, your common sense detector should be going off. If my liver's making it all day long, and if I don't eat enough, it's going to make more, why would God design the body to produce something all day long out of your liver that's going to kill you? Well, He didn't, and it doesn't. The problem is this, it's called pattern A, large buoyant. And you can check a blood test, it'll tell you if that's what you are. But this is good, this is healthy, it's large and buoyant. I describe it like a big fluffy cotton ball rolling down your arteries, keeping the artery wall smooth and clean. You want that. It's healthy. It's not associated with heart attacks at all. But you can transform this big fluffy down here to small, dense, pattern B. Think of that like a BB. Small, dense BB going down the wall, banging it, scraping it. This one does have a little bit of an association with heart attack, but that's not what God gave you. So what gets you from large, buoyant, big, fluffy down to small, dense? You guessed it, probably. I hope you did. Standard American, life and eating. Vegetable oils that have the heart healthy stamp on it will cause this. Avoid those, like we talked about yesterday. Sitting all day. Sitting's the new smoking. Sitting for 8 straight hours will cause this. Smoking will cause it. Stress will cause it. Lack of minerals in the diet will cause it. You need salt. Salt's not the enemy. We're not going to do a salt talk today, but just trust me, your ancestors ate salt and a lot of it, more than we do. But you need God's version, 70 plus minerals. That's sea salt. Not man. What does man do to food? We change it, we alter it, we strip it, so we get down to sodium and chloride and throw a little iodine. That's 3 versus 70. Go with the 70. But it is your standard American life that gets you eating and living in stress that gets you down here. And you can measure that. All right. So this is Chris Kenobi, great guy. He's actually ophthalmologist, was at UT Southwestern in Dallas. And he was noting, some doctors just have a curious mind, and they start to question, what is up with this age-related macular degeneration? He's an ophthalmologist, so he's seeing tons of macular degeneration. It's the number one leading cause of blindness, and the rates of it are just going through the roof like everything else. So he decided to go start digging and looking, what is causing this crazy epidemic? And where he landed was vegetable oils. And he gives a great talk, and you can look on YouTube, Denver Low Carb 2020, just put all that in his name. Watch the whole thing. And this slide is from that. I asked him for permission. He gave it to me. I've interviewed him a couple of times. Go listen to those. But here's a history. Remember, heart attacks is what we're talking about. So in Boston, there was no recorded heart disease deaths, and that was in 1811. There were 25 sudden deaths that some people say, I wonder if that was a heart attack, but The autopsies didn't ever show that. 8 in the whole world, this is worldwide in the 19th century. So all of the 1800s, they could only find 8 heart attacks worldwide. And then Sir William Osler, he's the founder of Johns Hopkins Medical School, considered the founder of Western medicine, late 1800s, early 1900s. He reported 6 cases of angina in his 21 years, and no heart attacks did he ever see. The founder of modern medicine in America at Hopkins never saw a heart attack in his career. Now we go to 1900, 12.5% of deaths are due to what's called heart disease in the literature, but it was valvular heart disease from infection. And infection, bacteria can get on the valve, mess it up, and you get heart failure and death from it. So the first recorded case of what's known as myocardial infarction, aka heart attacks, was published by John Herrick in 1912. One in the whole country, the first one ever that we could find. And then we just see this sudden escalation to now, like I said, it's a #1 killer, has been for a long time. Something changed around here, and we already talked about it yesterday. So, remember, all cardiologists think cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease. Not all, but the vast majority. It's what the schools teach, it's what the news says, it's just, that's what everyone's saying. What didn't used to be that way. And when this theory first got published, all the other doctors were like, what? Saturated fat? What are you talking about? My patient's been eating saturated fat this whole time. We never saw a heart attack. So there were a bunch of doctors that didn't agree with this. They didn't get the press, though. The very first study, they did it in rabbits who are herbivores. They fed them chicken eggs, and they fed them a very high quantity, 5x higher than normal, found in the blood of humans. And what they found were fatty deposits in their artery. So lots of problems with this study. That does not translate to anything on humans. But Ansel Keys, who was a nutritionist, and he came up with the K rations in World War II, so he was a national hero. Everybody loved Ansel Keys with the K rations, that's where it came from. So when Eisenhower had his heart attack, I think he was up in Denver, had a heart attack. It was kind of a newer thing, and the doctors there didn't really know what to do, and they called back to D.C. and asked his doctor what to do, and they just said bed rest and saltine crackers, I think, or something. But it kind of freaked out the whole country, and the country turned to Ansel Keys and said, Ansel, what do you think caused the president's heart attack? And Ansel said, I think it's saturated fat. That was his thought, his opinion, his theory. He didn't have any education, heart disease, or nutrition. Had not taken a college biology course, and that's okay. I mean, sometimes our education doesn't line up. We can go learn outside that, so I'm not going to ding him for that, but it's just kind of interesting to note. And he published his study to support his theory. It's called the 7-country study, and that looks pretty convincing. This study basically says, look at these countries that don't eat much saturated fat, they don't have many heart attacks. And look up here, these countries that eat more saturated fat, they have more heart attacks. And so he published that. Everybody went with that. They put it on him on the cover of Time magazine, and there we go. The theory's off and running. The problem is, it wasn't a 7-country study. It was a 21-country study. The other countries, 15 countries, it didn't match his theory. He just pulled those dots off the chart. He pulled that data. It was manipulated and corrupted study. France had the most saturated fat consumption of any country. They eat a lot of butter. And they had the least amount of heart attacks of any country. This whole thing started with the fraud. Right after that, because when you do a study like that, especially one that's giving you, whoa, wait a minute, this turns everything upside down, this doesn't seem right, well, you need to replicate it. So they went to replicate this thing. They did another study. It's called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, 1968 to 1973, 9,000 patients. Half these 9,000 people got to eat their bacon and eggs and saturated fat. The other half got to eat vegetable oils. Here's what they found. The people eating the vegetable oils decreased their LDL. Remember, that's a number on a paper. What do you care about? Heart attacks and death from heart attacks and mortality overall? There was no change in heart disease death rates. In fact, every 1% drop in cholesterol saw a 1% increase in mortality. 1968 to 1973 is when they did this. That didn't fit the theory. So they took that paper and put it in the filing cabinet and didn't publish it and didn't tell anybody. Until a few years ago, somebody found it and published it. It doesn't fit the theory. We're not going to publish it. That's called publication bias. The Sydney diet heart hypothesis or study, it came in right after the Minnesota one. It saw the same thing. And every study since then has showed the same thing. And that's what JAMA and the American College of Cardiology articles that I showed you a while ago, they were summary. They were review. They reviewed all the studies since then and to today. Now, I know this could sound shocking. How could it be this old family practice doctor from Post, Texas, who's now kind of crazy, holistic, integrative nutrition guy, and he's telling me everybody else is wrong? And I'm just presenting the studies. Margarine and butter. Margarine consumption goes up, butter consumption goes down, heart disease goes up. That's called correlation, not causation. It should mean investigation. Here's another one, same kind of deal. Vegetable oil rises, heart disease deaths rise as well. And that Dr. Chris Kenobi, I mentioned the ophthalmologist from UT Southwestern, the YouTube Low Carb Denver 2020. Go watch it. He goes way in depth. He's done the deep dive. He's published a book about it. That's what the radio interviews I did. You can go get the deep dive on that. I'm just giving you a real brief summary of it. But in general, if your gut instincts are, go with what your grandparents were doing, and the ingredients are two things. And this is across the board, guys. There's spaghetti sauce out there. You flip it over and it says tomatoes, sea salt, olive oil, and that's it. Go with that one. Because there's another one right next to it you can flip over, and it's got 20 different ingredients, and most of them you can't pronounce, don't know what they are, and there's a bunch of sugar in that one too, by the way. Don't get that one. This just is common sense, I think. We don't want to go with this one. Here's just some more animal versus plant-based fats per capita from 1909 to 2010. The consumption is going down on the animal-based, but heart disease, as we talked about, goes up. Now, you can overlay other things, sugar, the processed grains. And that's why we and not just we, but most guys that really take a look at this will land at three things. We call them the big three that we talked about yesterday. Vegetable oils, the seed oils, processed grain. I'm not anti-grain. Like I said, those biscuits, that's fresh milled wheat. But processed enriched white flour and processed sugar. I'm not anti-sugar. I love honey. I love organic maple syrup. And even good organic cane sugar is not the enemy. But it's this processed high fructose stuff. So those big three you could overlay right here too. And they all started to come in about that same time. All right, we talked about him already. Won't go into that. But like I said, he went to Canada, Alaska, down to the South Pacific. Then he went over to, so it's not, it doesn't matter what you're eating. The Eskimos weren't eating the same thing the Africans were eating. The Africans weren't eating what the British Isles and South Americans were eating. You know, they're all eating different. And some, it was almost all plants with a little bit of animal. The other, like the Maasai tribe in Africa, was almost all animal with a little bit of plant. So it was up and down that spectrum. He didn't find anybody that was purely plant-based. Everybody really coveted and valued the animal, and especially the organ meats is what he found. In fact, they would give the organ meats to the ladies that were of childbearing age because they knew the liver, the heart, the kidney, the spleen, the pancreas, all that, that's where the nutrition's really at. It's concentrated in there. So they would give that to the women so they would have healthy babies. That's what we recommend in our clinic. It's way better than any multivitamin. That's God's version of a multivitamin. Anyways, this is back to the Polynesian atolls. That's in the South Pacific Island. This study just talks about lots of saturated fat in their diet because coconut oil is saturated fat and very little, if any, heart disease. Here's a study, the Alaskan Eskimos, same thing, the customary high-fat diet, a lot of seal and whale blubber and all that, and the same conclusion. The atherosclerotic heart disease at a much lower rate than the general population. So if if saturated fat causes heart attacks, we should see it here in the natives. The Maasai tribe I mentioned, low prevalence of coronary disease despite milk and meat is being the primary part of their diet. So, familial hypercholesterolemia, that's a big fancy word for, there are gene mutations in certain families that make them just have super high cholesterol. And maybe, I mean, there's people in Lubbock in these family trees. I have some in my practice. So this is a known thing. All doctors know about this. So they've mapped these family trees. And they've gone and looked for, do these families tend to die of heart attack and stroke or die in general younger than other people because their cholesterol's through the roof? And so they did the study. And what they found was no evidence that high cholesterol in these families shortens the lifespan. They survive into the 7th and 8th decades just like everybody else. Here's another one, 1800s to 1900s. They did the family trees on these. They found less cancer, less infectious disease, and better overall health in these families that had the mutation to make high cholesterol. That should throw a big, big question mark on everybody who thinks high cholesterol kills you. Here's another one. This is a Norway study looking back from 1992 to 2010. No overall adverse effects of high cholesterol on longevity. Normal lifespan in people with this familial hypercholesterolemia. So this has been studied in depth by multiple researchers lots of times. They all come to the same conclusion. This is Journal of American Heart Association in 2014 when that was published. Now here's one, 20-year study. So that's a pretty good long study. Lancet 2001. They looked at cholesterol and all-cause mortality, death from all causes in elderly folks to see. This was down in Honolulu. Increased mortality in elderly people with low cholesterol. Opposite of the high cholesterol is going to kill you. Dietary fat, coronary heart disease. This is the Annals of Nutrition Metabolism, 2009. Intake of total fat was not significantly associated with coronary disease or mortality. Intake of animal fat was not significantly associated with coronary events or mortality. Fatal heart disease was not reduced by low-fat diets or vegetable oils. Here's another, this is a meta-analysis. That means it's kind of like a review study. Goes back and pulls data from all kinds of studies. This is Annual Journal of Nutrition, 2010. Same thing. A large meta-analysis involving 350,000 people. No association between saturated fat and heart disease. I know I'm getting redundant, guys, but this is a big topic. And you step out of this room into the world, and the world's going to pound you with, don't eat animal fat, it's going to give you heart attacks. That's why I'm pounding you with so many studies. This is another one, a Japanese prospective study, 58,000 men, 14 years. That's a good study. That's a long study. You'll see a lot of these statin studies. I'll show you a couple in a minute. They're like a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. The data's manipulated. So these are good long studies. No association between saturated fat and heart disease, and actually an inverse association between saturated fat and stroke. And what that means is the more saturated fat you ate, the less stroke you had. This one is on eggs. No relation between egg consumption and coronary heart disease. Meta-analysis from 2013, British Medical Journal. This meta-analysis identified no significant association between egg consumption and risk of heart attack or stroke. Here's one, Open Heart, 2015. The present review concludes that dietary advice, and what they're talking about, the dietary advice to eat low fat, the dietary advice not merely needs review, it should not have been introduced. This whole low-fat thing never should even come in. This one reviewed every paper ever published on cholesterol and longevity. Not a single study shows high cholesterol equals more death. This was British Medical Journal 2016. Lancet 2018, they were looking at full-fat dairy, because full-fat dairy is full of saturated fat, and if that's going to kill you, this study was looking to see that, and what they found was actually less death. Dietary guidelines recommend minimizing this whole fat dairy because saturated fat adversely affects your lipids, increases cardiovascular risk is what people think. Evidence for this contention is sparse and few data for the effects of dairy consumption on health are available from low-income and middle-income countries. Therefore, we aim to assess the association. So that's what the point of the study. We want to go assess this. Is there an association between drinking whole milk and heart attacks? And what they concluded, dairy consumption was associated with a lower risk of mortality and major cardiovascular events in a diverse multinational cohort. Lower risk. I already told you about this one, August of 2020, Journal of American College of Cardiology. We went through that. Same one here. This is JAMA 2022. So what I've done, I've gone back from the mid 1900s in these studies from 98 and 2001 and 2013 and 2016 and all the way to 2022. I'm not cherry picking. And why I go to these review studies is because these guys went and reviewed a lot of those that I just pulled. And this is what they're telling you. There's no good evidence. And again, back to the common sense thing. Heart attacks are the #1 killer and have been. 600 to 700,000 people a year this year, right now, and last year and the year before are dying. It's the #1 killer. Well, I'd argue that deception is probably the #1 killer, and we've been on the statin thing since I was in residency, and that was 2005. Statins really were rolling by then. So besides all these studies, just your common sense meter, you don't need to go be a doctor and read through studies like this. Trust that thing in you that says, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Because if it were cholesterol, and we're all on cholesterol meds because they are making half the population's on statins, we should have seen a massive drop in heart attack rates. And we haven't. All right. We already talked about this. So remember, next time you're at your doctor and he's saying, you have high cholesterol, say, yes. I'm going to have less cancer, less dementia. I'm going to be able to fight COVID better. Thanks, doc. And you might throw in there, hey, doc, does that lab tell you if my LDL is big, fluffy, or small, dense? Does that LDL lab you just checked, does that tell you if I'm inflamed cholesterol or not? And he'll probably look at you like, what are you talking about? Because I didn't learn this in med school, and the doctors I talk to that are coming out of that system and trying to learn the truth, and I tell them about this, they're clueless and don't know it. I'm telling you, you know more today than your doctor might know. And I'm not here to throw doctors under the bus. I was one of them. That's why I'm giving this talk, and that's why I have my podcast, and that's why I travel around the country talking, to wake people up to the truth. We are dying. I just got a text the other day. We'll get to that later because that'll get me off on another topic. But deception is killing people, keeping them sick, keeping them broke, bankrupting these companies. We're begging to stay in a job that's stressing me out, but I got to do it because I need the health insurance. When I have a patient tell me that, I have to bite my lip. You're stressing so much. And stress is the #1 thing that's going to move this big fluffy to small dense. And his #1 source of the stress is a job that he really hates, but he has to have the health insurance. The health insurance that allows you to play in the game. You're on the team that comes in dead last place. We talked about yesterday. We get the worst outcomes. Our infant mortality, maternal mortality, overall mortality. We spend the most money, go to the doctors the most, take the most drugs, do the most procedures to come in dead last place. That's like giving Texas Tech Athletic Department the biggest budget in the country, the best facilities in the country, and give them the #1 recruiting class every single year, and that football team come in dead last place in the Big 12 every single year. Ain't nobody going to put up with that. But we put up with it all right. Not only do we put up with it, we don't talk about it. Nobody even knows this. And when you speak up about it, then you're the crazy person. So, Anyways, I get a little fired up about this because God designed you to be well all the days of your life, and your health span curve should match your lifespan curve, and you fall over dead like Moses, and your spirit goes home, and that's it. We're not supposed to need a doctor. You don't need a doctor if you will steward your health. You got to get the knowledge, then walk it out, and I'm telling you, the number one thing is stress. It is right here, what we see, how we see. It's really our heart. What are our heart goggles telling us? Because all this I'm telling you could make you real mad. And you might think I'm real mad right now, and I'm not real mad. I'm real excited. What made me real mad, I didn't even know it, was sitting down there in Garza County trying to crank out a patient every 7 minutes just to see him come back in a few months with not any better. I'm just adding meds all the time. And in my inner man, I'm aggravated and mad, don't even know it. But I'm knowing on my inside, this ain't right. Nobody's getting well. Nobody's getting better. I'm never getting them off meds. They're dying younger and younger. I diagnosed a kid, a 7-year-old kid in Garza County with adult diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It's frustrating. I was mad back then, didn't quite know it, because they put me on the front page of the Washington Post, and we had plenty of money. You're supposed to be happy, right? So I'm not mad. I'm excited to go speak the truth. But like I said, I can sleep good at night when I tell my patients, here's your options. Here's your standard American option. The Texas Medical Board requires me by law to give you standard of care advice, and I'm giving it to you, and here it is. Texas Medical Board Rule 200 says I can give you complementary and alternative medical advice also. Here it is. Here's the outcomes for each. You make a choice. That's called informed consent. I just gave it to you. Whatever you want to do, it's a free country. See you later. I'll sleep good at night. The problem is your doctor can't give you that because he doesn't even know there's that option. He wasn't trained in it, doesn't know anything of this I just taught you. So don't get mad or frustrated. Get excited that you heard the truth. Now go walk it out and go be who God made you to be. All right. Cigarette consumption. Nobody ever talked about Eisenhower's a 4-pack a day smoker, and that 4 packs a day does damage you. But so does sitting, so does stress, so does vegetable oil. It's all the standard American stuff. Now this does make me mad because this is false advertising. And if during COVID, if I were to put out on my podcast or on my website, if I would have published out there, hey, ozone, which is oxygen, O3, cures COVID, or ultraviolet blood irradiation, that's when you take a patient's blood, shine UV light, and put it back into them. Sounds crazy. There's 300 published studies on it. The guy at Harvard's a leading authority on it. If I would have published, hey, this will help COVID or can fight COVID or cure COVID, can't use that cure word. If I were to put any of that out there to help y'all, I would have got a letter from the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, says that's false advertising. This is a warning. Take it off. One of my colleagues, David Brownstein, he's a family practitioner in Michigan, he got that letter because he put nebulized hydrogen peroxide with a drop of iodine will help with COVID, and he had the clinical experience to say that. He got that letter. He had to take that off. And how many people didn't get to know that? Probably none of y'all, or I mean, maybe some of y'all knew it, but Federal Trade Commission's real got their microscope on any doctor that's saying something that's not coming out of FDA approval. And I get that, snake oil, I mean, I get that. But this is false advertising right here. Lipitor reduces heart attacks 36%. They get to put a little asterisk right there. They get a real famous heart surgeon here, looking healthy and good, pushing this 36%. I mean, who wouldn't take that? 36%, that's huge. Well, look at the fine print. That means in a large clinical study, 3% of patients taking a sugar pill or placebo had a heart attack, compared to 2% of patients taking Lipitor. 3 minus 2, where I grew up, Leon Heights Elementary School in Belton, Texas, is 1. So how does 3 minus 2 equal 36? That's a whole nother lecture, but I'm telling you, it's statistical gymnastics. I would call it deception. But it's called relative risk reduction is 36%. Absolute risk reduction is 1%. They get to put relative risk reduction and trick you. And this is all through the media, Medscape, New York Times, that's all you'll see. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I'm running out of time. This would have been the truth. That doesn't sell. Who's going to take that for a 1% reduction, especially when you look at the side effect profile? Oh, just real quick, here's the language. It's spectacular, breathtaking, blockbuster, paradigm shifting. These are quotes from doctors. I'm telling you, doctors don't even know to go figure out the difference between relative risk and absolute risk. I'm not going to go through all that real quick. This book, The Statin Disaster, David Brownstein, he's the one I just mentioned about COVID and hydrogen peroxide and all that. Well, he published a book. Go get it. It's an easy read. It's big print. It's layman's terms. It's for the public, but it's good for doctors. I tell every single patient that's seeing a cardiologist for their cardiologist Christmas present, buy them this book and go wrap it up real nice, put a sweet note, do it in love. If it's ulterior motive in your heart, don't do it. But if it's in love that you want to know the truth, then maybe do it. But on this page, 126, and the reason a doctor might look at this is because, especially if they're as old as I'm not that old, but these studies on Lipitor and Crestor, these are famous studies. They will recognize these names. So he pulled all these studies on statins, and one of these columns is the risk reduction. The people that took the statin versus the placebo group, the sugar pill, what was the difference on average? And he averaged them all, and it's that same 0.8% that I mentioned earlier. It's what JAMA found. It's what American College of Cardiology found. It's what everybody finds. But there's the actual studies that the doctors would recognize. I just went through some math on how they get relative risk. Y'all don't need to know that. He goes through all the side effects: muscle pain, muscle breakdown, memory loss, dementia, diabetes. One study showed a 25% increased risk of diabetes in women for a less than 1% decrease in heart attack. But there's lots and lots and lots of potential side effects. Remember, that enzyme, you block that enzyme, you're blocking a lot of downstream stuff. So what does cause heart attacks? There's different theories on this: clogged heart theory, inflamed heart theory, and starved heart theory. They're all somewhat correct. That pipe, your coronary artery, it's delivering blood to your heart muscle. That muscle's working 60 beats a minute every day that you're alive. It never gets a break. Your calf starts to cramp, you can sit down and give it a break, and that lactic acid will go away in a minute. Your heart doesn't get that. It's got to be super efficient. The mitochondria, remember the carburetors? When I say efficient, I mean efficient carburetors. That heart muscle cell that never gets a break, that carburetor needs real tuned up. And when it doesn't get it, it starts to struggle, and it starts putting out too much exhaust, free radicals. Those free radicals shift the pH of that water, because that cell is just a bag of water floating in extracellular water. We're one big bag of water. When that carburetor in your muscle, heart muscle, struggling, and it's pumping out that black smoke out the tailpipe, it changes the pH of that intracellular water. When that pH shifts and gets more acidic, you cannot dissolve oxygen very well in an acidic fluid. Think of a fish tank. That fish tank, you get that oxygen level off and the pH off, and all of a sudden there's green everywhere and those fish are dying. Acidic water can't dissolve oxygen. Well, remember your carburetor? It's in this water. It needs oxygen. Remember, fuel, oxygen, spark plug, combustion, energy, exhaust. I didn't mention the heat. And your radiator takes your heat out. Well, in the human body, that's where human heat comes from. That's a way to know if your carburetors are tuned up, if your body heat's running low all the time, cold all the time. That's a clue. But anyways, that oxygen can't get in there now. You've got acidic environment. That oxygen can't get in there. And you do this long enough, that carburetor actually flips a switch into what a whole nother pathway of energy production. It's called anaerobic metabolism. Anaerobic means no oxygen. So all of a sudden your carburetor, in a last-ditch effort, out of desperation of trying to survive and make energy, flips the switch to anaerobic because there's not enough oxygen. You're breathing oxygen, but it ain't getting in to your carburetor. Which I didn't mention this. There's 7 cell membranes between the air that you're breathing into your lung. It's got to pass through cell membranes, and there's 7 of them to get your carburetor from your lung through the bloodstream and all the way to your carburetor. Those cell membranes, remember, are made of fat. Certain fats repel oxygen. Don't let the oxygen get through very easy. So other fats let oxygen get through real easy. Guess which ones repel? Seed oils. Guess which ones say oxygen, come right through here, I love you, and zoom right through? The animal fats. But anyways, back to this carburetor. Flips the switch to anaerobic metabolism. That's making energy without oxygen. The byproduct, number one, it's very, very little. It's 2 miles per gallon. It's very little ATP energy production. Where if you're burning fat or glucose, you're making in the 40 to 100 range miles per gallon. So you just got your miles per gallon super low. You're barely hanging on for dear life. But the free radical production, lactic acid, is produced with anaerobic metabolism. And you get lactic acid being produced out of that carburetor. Now that whole cell is so acidic, it dies. You get enough of your muscle cells and of your heart muscle dying, it can't actually do the contraction anymore. This gets a little complicated. There's a book that explains it. I'll point you to it. You can read about it. Actually, it's right here on the screen. Human Heart, Cosmic Heart. So it may be hard for me to explain this, but the heart, when it's pumping, it's not a pressure pump. Squeeze, force blood out. There's a vortex it's created. When it's moving in motion, it's actually a hydraulic pump. It's pulling that blood through your circulatory system. That's a key piece of knowledge. So when this whole process starts to break down with your carburetor, you flip anaerobic, you make all this lactic acid, that cell starts to die. You get enough of these cells dying, suddenly that hydraulic vortex force gets disrupted, the flow through that artery. Imagine a straw that you're sucking on real hard and you have the walls collapse. It's a combination of that vortex being disrupted and the wall of your coronary collapsing, blood clot, heart attack. The wall of your artery should be lined with what's called glycocalyx. I think I have a picture here in a minute. And it's this slick inner lining, glycocalyx. This was just discovered about 15, 20 years ago. The glycocalyx has water, is made of a fourth phase of water. We grew up learning water only had 3 phases, liquid, solid, and gas, right? Steam, ice, water. Well, there's a fourth one called the fourth phase of water. This has been known for 20 plus years. Dr. Gerald Pollack, University of Washington. He's one that discovered this. I interviewed him too. Go back on the podcast and listen. He wrote a great book. Or talk to Chad Wall about it. He'll tell you more than you want to know about it. But this fourth phase of water, think of it like almost like a liquid jello-y substance. That's what's supposed to line these arteries, and this fourth phase of water, structured or exclusion zone water, has a negative charge to it. Think of 2 magnets. When you flip them, negative to negative, you can't touch them, they repel. So the inner lining of the artery wall actually has that negative charge, or should, and it repels and keeps everything off that wall. Well, the standard American life, stress, vegetable oils, all the things, diminish that charge, even eliminate that charge, that slick, nice layer disappears. So now we have an exposed wall that's weakened. The body's trying to stiffen that thing up because when it's weakened, it's going to collapse under that hydraulic pulling force. It's going to collapse. So the body's actually trying to stiffen that wall up by laying down calcium and plaque. It's a defense mechanism. It's a last-ditch survival effect. The body's trying to save itself by stiffening up this artery. So it's not that there's not blockages or clogs or plaques and all that, but that's actually a response. That's not really the root cause. So the clog theory is just not, there's a little bit of truth in it, but it's treating just the clog. It doesn't get the job done, as we've seen, 0.8% reduction in heart attacks if you try to do that. So this inflamed heart theory, that goes a little deeper. Inflammation. You have inflammation along your wall. You have inflamed plaque. You have inflamed LDL. That's in the mix. But you go a little deeper. This starved heart, that's starved, meaning that mitochondria is starved. You've got to get the mitochondria, the carburetor, tuned up. That is where the truth lies, going deeper into the mitochondria. And pretty much everyone now, forward-thinking cardiologists are in agreement. Heart disease is a mitochondrial disease. I mean, pretty much everybody's in agreement on that. These two books pretty much summarize everything I just said about the inner lining of the artery being a negative charge in the glycocalyx, the hydraulic pump, all that stuff. I've interviewed both these guys, Dr. Kendrick and Dr. Cowan, so you can go back and listen to those. Stents don't prevent heart attack or death. That was a study way back in the mid-2000, like 2007, yeah, March 26. Harvard said stents and bypass surgery. This is 2019. So how could this be compared to not doing them? Here's what the studies show. If you're having an active acute MI right now, acute myocardial infarction, right now, heart attack, right now, you just had that thing collapse on you and you've got a blood clot because that obviously the wall collapsed. That blood's backed up in your system, blood that just sits there, it's clotting. So if you can get real quick, your buddy throws you in the truck, takes you to UMC, they right to the cath lab, go in there, suck that, get that blood clot out of you, and boom, stench in, open that, get that flow going. That'll save your life. But the vast majority of stents, I don't have the exact number, but it's 90 plus, is not the scenario I just laid out. The vast majority is that you farmers who are sitting in your tractor all day eating your vegetables, not just y'all, every standard American, and stress, and you start getting a little chest pain. That heavy, that pressure I talked about yesterday, and you kind of ignore it. And it's when you're going up and down the steps or you're carrying a load, you got that sack of feed or whatever you're carrying, and it kind of gets you, and then you set that down, you take a deep breath, and it kind of eases off, and you just keep ignoring it. And then finally, it's just kind of coming so often, you tell your wife about it, and she makes you go to the doctor. And the doctor hears that story. Well, that's angina. That's pain. That's that lactic acid starting to build up. Your body's telling you. So then you go to the doctor, he's like, yep, that sounds like you got a blockage. Let's do a stress test, and they do it, and they cath you. They see that blockage, put a stent in. That scenario, that stent doesn't prevent the future heart attack. That's what these studies are saying. And it's really cool, actually. The body, when you're starting to have that collapse happen in a spot, and the calcium and the plaque and all that's building up, the blockage building up, your body knows that blockage is there. It starts to grow a new vessel around that blockage. God is giving you your own bypass. It's called a collateral. Your body grows its own bypass. It's amazing what the body does to save itself. All right, we're wrapping up here. This book talks about all the things that will lead to what I just laid out there. The clogged, the inflamed, and the starved. It's sitting, smoking, stress, sunshine deficiency, the big three that we've talked about. LDL is in there, but it comes in at number 46 out of 48. So there's 45 other things more important than LDL. Remember, it's inflamed LDL that's a problem. And actually, sunbathing, I had 10 years where a statin's only going to give you 3 days to longevity. He talks all about that in the book. He has tons of studies in there. So don't be a standard American. Get ancestral. That's the point of all this that I've been teaching y'all. Get back to your roots, what your great-great-grandparents were doing. I know that's hard to do in the standard American world now, but you can do it. So get after it. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of changing gain the knowledge, change your habits, walk it out. It's fine. It's no big deal. You can do this. You can make biscuits and gravy like I did. Last one, I kind of poked at the husbands earlier. This study, I just read it. 10,000 men were asked, do you feel love from your wives? And the ones that said no, they get more angina. That's a yellow bar. The ones that said yes, they get less. So wives, love your men. I just had to add that on there. I know y'all do, ladies. Y'all just show your love in different ways that we don't always get. Here's a bunch of books you can read. The You're the Cure podcast on our website. I'll try to leave that for a second if you want to take a picture. I'm not selling our website. I'm not selling me. I'm not selling anything. I don't charge when I go talk anywhere because you can't charge for the truth, I don't think. So I'm just here to tell y'all the truth. But I've had a number of y'all ask me about seeing me as a doctor, and I would love to see everybody, but it's not about me. And plus, I'm filled up pretty much. It's about the truth. Just get the truth in you. So our resources on our website, our podcast in particular, that's where we put all this. So you can go find it. VeritasWellnessMember.com under resources. There's articles, there's blogs I write, but mainly it says podcast, and we break it down here under topics. You can click that topic thing, and one of the topics is heart disease and cholesterol. Just click that, and all those people are on there and more. There's one on vaccines too. There's Chris Kenobi, you can go listen to him. And then Dr. Diamond's where I got a lot of my slides, and thanks to Dr. Diamond, he allowed me to use those slides. And you can see his whole lecture at this place, the Wise Traditions Conference 2019. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patients in the care of the human frame and diet and in the cause and prevention of disease. That's what doctors need to be doing. Doctor, Latin root of doctor, teacher. Every single doctor needs to be teaching the truth, in my opinion. And the founder of modern medicine, Hopkins, I mentioned earlier, Sir William Osler said, the first duty of the physician is to teach the masses, not to take medicine. So again, I know I can come across anti-modern medicine, anti-pharmaceutical, and like I said yesterday, I ride pharmaceuticals every day. It's a Band-Aid, it's a symptom treatment, it gets something done today, like migraine headache, Imitrex, knock it out, but why is that migraine coming? I give you nitroglycerin for that chest pain to open that thing back up for a minute, but just staying there, long-term outcomes don't change. That's why we're dying younger. We gotta go deeper. So don't go deeper. Veritas Wellness is where you can join if you want to learn more. You get with the health coach. That's a bunch of ladies. Two of them will be here this afternoon in the workshop teaching about the 5 superfoods. So y'all come to that and y'all can meet Nicole and Bella, or go on the website and y'all get an appointment with Nicole or Bella or some other ladies, and they'll teach you a lot of this truth. Help you change they'll teach you how to make biscuits and gravy, old school way. Thank y'all again for inviting me to this. It's awesome. I encourage you farmers, just keep going. I know it's hard and stressful, and when nobody has it all figured out, but I know what y'all are trying to do here to get your soil better. I know any little step you move in that direction is going to be beneficial for the land, for all of the community, and for our food and for our health. So we're all connected. We're all on the same team. No condemnation. Anybody spraying glyphosate. But if there is another way, let the Holy Spirit lead you into all truth and show you the way. Thank you all.